Huge disclaimer, this was never meant for me to take sides, so I'm not trying to take sides. I'm just trying to explain to these ideas of investment firms, because I think JP Morgan is a company too, and JP Morgan is an investment company, well, finance company, that people use to invest long term and plan for their retirements. Peloton is the bikes. Foot Locker is a shoe brand, of course. Real is a platform that sells shoes. It's more like Depop or it's more like Depop, and then social media is just kind of limiting what he says, which we understand why. But overall, I just wanted to clarify that I have no affiliation with any of these brands. I'm just speaking from the sources that I'm getting, and take what I say with a grain of salt, and I'm not a sneakerhead. I just want to remind y'all of that. And I mean, I mean to offend, and I don't want to offend anybody with what I say in this episode, because it is a broad episode. But overall, I just kind of wanted to give you points and just inform. Okay, so firstly, let's talk about Kanye West, right? Some people believe, that Kanye West is crazy. He's lost $1 million worth of money, and people don't necessarily understand how he lost $1 million in this so-called day. And so we're going to take a deeper look into it, and I'm going to talk about kind of who kind of did it, and then what kind of happened, and who cut ties with who, and then I'm gonna explain this patent idea, which, in the long run, which I think when I'm talking about Kanye West is controversial because I have a love for the way Kanye creates his music, and he is considered a genius by few. And so, this move that necessarily isn't the smartest move that Kanye's ever made comes into question. That thing of genius, and people don't understand what's kind of happening. I think we'll talk about the school. We will talk about the ties that are cut. We'll talk about the ties that, were cut and severed, and then we're going to talk about this $2 billion that he was worth, and we'll talk about that. And so I think this will probably be one of the longer episodes, and it simply being the fact that there's a lot of information. There's a lot of information that has to that deals with kind of this idea of $2 million, and people think, oh well, he had $2 million in the bank, and it being physical cash. And so I'm gonna kind of talk about these deals, right? And then I'm going to go into detail about the sketches thing. I'm gonna go into detail, and it's gonna seem like I'm rambling, but in the outlook of it, I'm doing it for the right reasons. It just may not come out to look like I'm doing it for the right reasons. And so when I talk about it, I'm going to refer to the contact, the names, and kind of these agreements that these agreements are not made public, but I'm going to answer that controversial question and look at it from a different perspective, which may seem longer than, people normally expect me to talk. So this will probably be one of these longer episodes that I talk about, and I am going to go into detail about the situation, kind of that what stands and where it is at now, right? I'm going to try to be unbiased as possible in this episode, which is really going to be very informative. So we'll see how that goes, and I'm not kind of rating a song about it, so we'll just kind of see. So I hope that people are aware that I am not affiliated with Kanye, not affiliated with Adidas, not affiliated with Vogue, not affiliated with any of these people, and I'm just kind of speaking on an outside perspective of these deals. And I haven't read these contracts because you can't find these contracts anywhere, and that's a whole nother situation. So, real quick, let's see if we have any sponsors. We'll get right into this.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Okay, so typically when I talk about an artist, I'm talking about their music, which to some extent is, you kind of have to understand backroom deals to understand the music aspect of it, right? And so when I talk with a grain of salt, unless there's like patent ideas that I've seen the patents, but I'm not sure what the actual shoes are called, and we'll get into this and why patents are important. We'll get into all of it, really. So, firstly, let's talk about this deal. This $2 million, right, it's divided. So, what I think Kanye did, and what I think Adidas, Vogue, and everyone that he was endorsed with, and the agency that managed him at the time, I think he had deals in his contracts where if he signed with that company or that company for a little while, he would get stocks in that company, right? And then, as people know, stocks fall and plummet, which is why the idea of him not being worth as much comes into question, right? Because the whole thing, okay, so Forbes, when they did it, Forbes does it by the money you have in your bank. They do it by the, let me figure out the right terminology, the money you have in your bank, your endorsements that are going to make you roughly how much you're going to make a year, which is still an estimate. It's not necessarily written in fact. They do stocks, they do investments. Well, stocks and investments are kind of the same thing, but there are certain investments that you can't invest in like you would invest in a stock. So that's what's happening. So this $220 million deal that he has with Adidas is rumored to be around the Yeezys, which Ye has made a brand, and it's been called Yeezys, and people know Yeezy. Kanye, they know Ye, or they know Kanye as the face of that brand. However, making clothes and making shoes is not a business that, if you do it correctly, is done to make a profit. Now, when I say that, it sounds hypocritical, and to some extent, it is, right? Because fabrics cost money, material costs money, and a lot of stuff costs money. Now, there have been rumors, right, that certain shoe companies use China to make, because it's cheaper to do labor, and it's cheaper wages for labor, which it is in other countries. And I personally don't know any of these businesses and how they practice, so I'm not speaking on that. I'm speaking on this $220 million deal that's been floating around as the annual number he was making from Adidas. And so this deal, so let me explain this by saying this. Basically, he made a comment saying, the comment is, depending on how you view it, is kind of a weird comment, and I'm not going to say it myself, but he was talking about the power dynamics in a different aspect, right? Like, he was talking about it in an aspect of power dynamics that rule the world and society, which I think we all know is there, right? Like, at a certain point, there are certain power dynamics that are at play at certain times, right? And then his comment about his tweet that he made, that he spelled the word wrong, but it still didn't help, right? It's a weird thing, right? Like, a lot of people don't know the actual word, right? But then if you change the word, or Siri changes the word because it doesn't think that's the right word, you get that, and many people don't proofread their tweets or like their captions, or they don't proofread it, so they just go with it and let Siri correct it as they go, and that's that. And I think that's what happened with Kanye. That might not be the case, but it might, right? So Kanye, and I get it. Kanye has been a person that goes against the grain. That's what Kanye has done his whole career. He's made it to where he has always said, I'm going against the grain because the grain isn't working for people, which to some extent we could talk about that, right? And talk about how, the stand on situations that could be fixed, and how a system can be fixed without it being broken and being fixed with inside, right? We could talk about that, but that's a longer discussion inside itself, and I don't know if you want to listen to me rant for an hour about fixing the system within, so I'm going to kind of keep it short and keep it focused on the brands, right? So he had to deal with Vogue, which Vogue released some of his stuff and endorsed him, and he would probably get free stuff to wear, and he would have to promote it on his Instagram, Twitter, or whatever, right? Like, that's what a lot of influencers do, and I'm going to consider Kanye an influencer because his impact that he's been able to do with his shoes and his clothing brand. Okay, so then that is something that we have to talk about, and I have to talk about assets, because when I talk about assets, people are like, well, when people do network, and when they look up network, they think, oh, that's how much money a person has money in the bank, and that's not entirely true, because assets over time grow value. I'm pretty sure people have heard that cars lose 10%, 20% of their value when they come off the lot, right? Which, to some extent, leaves you like, then why are these rappers getting a Rolls Royce? Why are these people getting Ferraris? Why are McLarens, right? Like, in the end, cars aren't, if they're not ones of ones, they're a liability. And liabilities are stuff that lose the value over time that you cannot resell for the same price you bought it for. Assets over time, they're supposed to grow. Now, they won't always grow, right? Like, they won't always grow, but they grow over time, or they keep their value. For example, when people buy houses, right? And if you keep it up in a good condition and the market price doesn't fall, you can sell it for that same price that you bought it for, or even double that, right? And that's the weird thing about people not understanding that assets aren't necessarily something you have in the bank. It's just what money that you invest. And that's why a lot of people say that money in the bank is worthless. Which, to some extent, you could argue, well, if it's in my bank, then I can buy it, right? Which, that's a great idea. But then this whole idea of people saying that, hey, well, credit is the new way of doing it, and if you have enough credit, you can buy whatever you want, and you don't have to spend your actual cash, and your actual cash you can use to pay you off your credit and get more credit, right? The whole concept of that, and as I said, we could talk about this for days. Anyway, inside this contract, there are situations that Kanye didn't, and Kanye, well, this is the thing. So, this thing with Adidas, because it's the most public thing, is that they were going to go to court and see what Kanye could get, right? And then you have to figure out what percentages what is owed. So, and then what is owed, what is already received, what are we considering as deductible, what do we own, right? And Adidas probably has that in their contract, but a lot of people do not read their contracts. They sign it because they see the advance. And advances are basically, hey, we're going to give you X amount of money, you do it, you give us a product, or you give us a product to create the product or whatever, and then we just provide on investments. That's what the whole concept of record labels, and that's another discussion in itself. So anyway, this idea of people saying, well, I know he's the face, or for example, we associate Yeezy we associate Yeezys with Kanye, even though Adidas makes the shoe in their factory and this, right? And people don't understand that patents are very important. And so it's kind of, as I said, this episode is more kind of me of explaining the different concepts and stuff, because patents are very important. And what patents are, okay, so I'm back on this idea of patents, and patents aren't necessarily what the person is known for. So, for example, this is the best way to explain patents, is you have the right, you own all rights to that shoe or that brand, right, without and people pay you to use your pen, which is a weird thing, right? Because I think people associate Lamborghini, Mercedes, upper class Mercedes, McLaren, Lamborghini, Ferrari, with butterfly doors, right? But the inventor of butterfly doors, I think, is John Bugatti, and then Mercedes has their own patent for, is it Falcon doors? Anyway, Falcon doors. The difference between Falcon doors and butterfly doors is the way that they open. They all open from the. They all use the same hooks, but they open differently. Like one opens up wider than the other, and one opens straight up, right? But anyway, so they own that. So if anybody wants to use those patents, they have to pay that person to use their invention, and over time you receive royalties, which royalties are nothing new. Royalties are just how much a person pays you to use your invention or use your design or pay you for it, right? Which legally is like, the best way to explain it for people would be sampling. Sampling is like, hey, I'm gonna use this person's song and kind of sample it to make my own remix of that song or make my own song, which then you have to get licensing and stuff, and you have to get it approved. Patents are the same way. You just have to get it approved, and that they have a identification number that's federal, right? But it's a federal system it's a federal system that keeps in track that who owns the rights and copyrights to all, right? And so, as it is true, they were going to go to a lawsuit with this, and depending on how that lawsuit was going to go, it could work, right? Now, I don't know the exact. I've heard two different messages, two different bits being said, and that's the thing. When you listen to bits or like microseconds of clips, it's very important that you know that micro bits count. Now, people use it to promote episodes and everything, which that's your legal right to do. Like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with promoting your own show, right? But I think you have to realize that everything that's promotion, and people will, and I know business majors and marketing majors will, marketing people will beg to differ with me and go, well, that's not necessarily true, right? But it's sort of true, right? Like, you don't need all publicity is not good publicity, and I know people argue that, well, if it's publicity, it's still good or bad, it's still getting your name out there, and sure, I mean, I argue with that, but, these investments that he had over time were not necessarily going to be his investments full time, but it ended up being that he would have to work on those because he owns patents to the brand. He created the brand, that's fine, but Adidas is like, well, if we're gonna make the shoe, we're gonna get the patent, and they got the patent. Patents are important, and I don't think a lot of people think, oh, well, if I create something, I don't have to get it legally and federally marked for the invention. The people just have to pay me for it, and in a way that's how it works. But you have to go to trademarking, which I'm pretty sure Kanye has the rights, the trademark rights to Yeezys, but he might not, and Adidas might have that, right? But over time, any shoe that which is a smart business model. Anything we make, any shoe model we make, hey, we get it patent, so that they have to pay us, and directly we get to keep any rights and any money and that's fine. They were probably paying him a percentage of the amount of Yeezys they were selling anyway, which I argue is very weird to me, and I will talk about that, right? But I think, and I'll end it on this note. I'll end it on this note, and then I'll end it on this note. But I'm not the typical sneakerhead, right? But I go in a Foot Locker sometimes, and if you ask me, I've never seen Yeezys on the Foot Locker floor, which as I said, take mine with a grain of salt. I'm not a sneaker head, right? Like, I'm not huge on sneakers, right? But I would assume for you to take them off the floor, they would have to be on the floor to take them off, right? Because if you got anything in the back, if you don't sell them, you just don't sell them. And then, over time, you just send them back. And that's distributing. And distributing is a whole nother issue, right? And I think Spotify runs into this issue of Kanye is, and that's why I think they're not planning on doing it, is because Kanye is an artist on Spotify, which means you can say what you want, right? But it's a weird thing, right? And so I'm gonna talk about the freedom of speech. Well, actually, I'm gonna talk about the freedom of speech thing, which it's a weird thing to me because so freedom of speech, and typically if you ask me what's the difference between freedom of speech and this and that, right? So the concept of freedom of speech, which if you ask me still has guidelines around it, freedom of speech is that the government cannot step in and just arrest you, jail you, kill you for something that you say or publicly say or do or report on, which has its things. Like the theater thing, certain things you can't say in theaters. I mean, that's kind of obvious. You don't want to say certain things to scare people if you're watching a horror film or you're just watching another movie. There's just certain things you can't say, right? But it does not protect you from private companies. Like, yes, it protects you from the government. The government can't get you. Like, there's no law that will protect you from tax evasion, right? But so that's the thing. Freedom of speech, I think people assume, protects you from everybody, even the government. And it does protect you from the government, but it does not protect you from privately owned companies, which, that's depending on how you say it. Yeah, it's freedom of speech. You can't be controlled or attacked by the government for what you say, which is a plus, right? But private companies can do what they want in their best interests. So I understand why, they're doing what they're doing. That's why you see some companies staying, some companies not. While I think about it, because this did come up, the people that were canceling him, right? Like Def Jam is run by Paul Rosenberg. Paul Rosenberg is best known for running Def Jam, but also Shady Records. He's also best known for working on Eminem's album. Eminem's albums, you could hear him, like on Kamikaze, he has a part where he calls Eminem and says, "Are you sure you want to do this with people that don't agree with you? Do you want to are you gonna make a part 2 for people that don't agree with your stance on Kamikaze?" Right? And Kamikaze is Eminem's album. I just want to make that clear. I don't know what his religion is, and I'm not touching that. So that's what happened, right? And then they say, well, Adidas is a Jewish-run company, which that's fine, So is Skechers. I believe, I could be wrong, but I think Skechers is still a Jewish-owned company. A lot of these companies that a lot of people buy from in the United States or in the States are European companies, and y'all don't realize it because you just assume that everything you buy is American, and that's not entirely true, which, no disrespect to Americans, I get it. But over time, we're going to kind of get into those aspects of it and see, not if I can change your mind, but if I can kind of talk you into inform you on what's happening with the Kanye West situation in kind of more detail, kind of layman's terms, but in more detail. So, as I said, this isn't a normal episode. I'm just talking about Kanye's situation in more detail, kind of explaining certain things. If I did explain it, so I hope you enjoyed the episode.